Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for joining me on a very nice Tuesday evening. Hope you had your dinner because you're in for a long session with MX Global. So I guess you're all pretty excited about to be part of this interesting session. So remember, before we begin, remember to like and share the video so that your friends can also benefit from this and give us some love here as well. So let me begin. So I'm sure you have read or heard that MX Global has secured Binance and Cuscapi as investors or partners to be part of their growth plans. So I'm delighted to have today with me Dr. Fazli Shah, CEO of MX Global, and he will talk about the deal and share with us what is in the pipeline. So over to you, Dato.
Hi, Doreen. First of all, thanks so much to yourself for taking time out of your wonderful Tuesday to host us tonight, and I thank you to the team at Sifu for having us over to address your audience, and also to I believe this is being broadcasted all over Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So that's cool. Yeah, super excited to share with you today. I think a little bit of what we anticipate is going to be, the next 18-24 months of kind of like our life cycle of a product. Yeah, I think just by way of introduction, MS Global, we're the fourth and latest recipient of the Recognized Market Operator Digital Asset Exchange registration with the SC. So I guess in layman's terms, we're a legal cryptocurrency exchange in Malaysia, and that came in July 2021. And of course, it was quite an arduous journey to go through everything with the regulator. I think they take their role very seriously, and obviously, I think a lot of credit to them for really looking out for the man on the street, for that investor protection. And of course, in the first 6 months, we concentrated a lot on trying to think through who would be the right partners and what's the path of growth. Because I think, testament to the efforts of the first three licensees, um, they've done a very good job on the retail side. So we think, of course, that's a great place to be, but there's a lot more that we can do. And so I'm a firm believer that I'm a firm believer that the regulated space shouldn't be seen as inferior to the unregulated space, right? There's a balance between the investor protection, but also at the same time, I think there's untapped potential when it comes to the kind of products that we can have in a market like Malaysia. So we're really looking forward to that, and that I think that gives away a little bit of why we decided to partner up with Binance and Cuscapi on this journey. So do let me know, like I think as you want to go ahead and
Yep.
kind of look at the different facets of the deal
Okay.
and what we have in store.
Right. So maybe Dato, you can take us through your slides.
Oh yeah. All right. So to be honest, I didn't know that we had slides there. So I think again, um, that kind of gives you a bit of a sense of reality of what it's like after we made this announcement, right? So we have very serious partners in Binance. Obviously, as you know, Binance is the world's number one cryptocurrency by kind of daily and annual volume. They account for close to 60% of all cryptocurrencies traded around the world. And then, of course, Cuscapi, they've been in the digitalization space before it was even called digitalization. So I think that's testament to the fact that I think my teams are all in a way autopilot, but like it's all hands on deck, and everyone's trying to do just I think sprinting from 0 to 100. So I actually didn't know that we had slides, which is cool. So all right. So I think this shares a little bit about what we're about, right? As I said, we're an RMO DEX, which is technically in the Malaysian regulations what you call a cryptocurrency, or in the regulations is referred to as digital assets. So it extends beyond cryptocurrencies, and I think as the industry grows, and we see kind of new things being tokenized, and then I think that's related to the next what we anticipate as the next license that the IC will, a series of licenses the SEC will give out, which is the IEO license, the Initial Exchange Operator license. So I think this is where we're right at the cusp of it, and we really see our role as being twofold to kind of figure out what's worked in the unregulated space and how do you localize that to a Malaysian context. At the same time, how do we best support the Malaysian or Malaysian based projects which are going to effectively do their initial exchange offerings, which is kind of like an ICO, but with a lot more regulatory rigor around it. So they'll effectively go to market in terms of fundraising through that route from Malaysia. And so I think that's cool. So how do we best serve them so that they have liquidity, and how do we best serve their investors so that they have that ounce of safety and protection built into that. So maybe we can go to the next slide. Yeah. So our first partner is of course Cuscapi. I should give you a little bit of background on like how we structured the deal, right? I'm a firm believer that I think if you went after, and my background is really in startups and VCs, that if we found the right strategic partner, then we would be more appealing to other strategic partners, and even more appealing to partners who would be able, who will professionally manage money, specifically like VCs. So we went down this list, and then we kind of thought, if we were not to say reinvent, but if we were trying to birth like a new flavor of digital assets or cryptocurrencies, which works within the Malaysian context, right? Who would we want to be able to do business with? Who would we want to partner with? So I'm not going to say that Binance and Cuscapi were the first two names. That's obviously not how it works. But we thought really in kind of broad categories, one partner really should have deep experience in running an exchange, right? And we would figure out along the way how do we coalesce that with the regulated space in Malaysia. And the other partner should be really about digitalization, really about bringing companies and people towards using more digital or digitalized services. So that's one of the reasons that Cuscapi kind of showed up on our list, or rather, is all a list of guys who are doing this kind of businesses, and we initiated conversations with a few of them. Safe to say, I think Cuscapi had the most aligned vision with us in terms of what could really happen in the space that they occupy, right? Which is basically almost every other restaurant or hotel that you go to is currently using a Cuscapi system. It's a very enterprise-based business, so I think the man on the street wouldn't recognize the name Cuscapi unless you've ever worked as a server or maybe worked in a hotel, right? You would have noticed the brand on the machine. But we thought, if that's monumentally hard to have the dominant market share in basically the way that businesses, accept money, issue receipts and payment, and then that is now currently sitting on some sort of digital ledger. It's probably not on blockchain. I say it is. We know it for sure. It's not on blockchain, which is one of the values that we can bring to the partnership, right? So Cuscapi has this forward vision where you would take that and then marry that with the digital asset world at various levels. So I think that's why, and of course they give us a really great offer. It's not easy to, I think, compete in terms of valuation with the likes of somebody as deep pocketed as Binance. But I think that's where Cuscapi, we were very delighted with the offer that Cuscapi put in, and then that's why I think it's a marriage that works on multiple ends in that sense. If we go to the next slide. And of course, I don't even think I need to introduce this brand. I would take it because the majority of your listeners are investing either professionally or that's something that they're doing very frequently for themselves. I'm sure almost all of your listeners have heard of Binance. So as I said, number one in the world, of course, made it to the top of our list. And then, as I said, we were looking for a fit with a partner that would understand the nuances of what we were going through, in the sense that we can't just take it off the shelf in terms of what's being done in the regulated space. And so they would have to have a shared vision, which in itself sounds quite easy, but it's actually a very, very difficult proposition for these guys who are playing in, either offshore or unregulated spaces, right? You open up yourself to kind of a lot of scrutiny in that sense. And of course, the temptation is always there that because they're very big and we just newly started. The temptation is always there to say, hey, here's a massive check. So why don't you just hand over your company to us? But again, this is one of those things where I think timing was totally out of our control in that sense, but it worked out very well for us, right? For those of you who have been following the space, in the time that we negotiated, CZ, the founder of Binance, decided that they wanted to partner with the government of Dubai to essentially help Dubai and the UAE shape their regulation. So they wanted to move into a very regulated model. And what's interesting about the cryptocurrency space is like it's not like banking where you're too big to fail, right? A player like Binance, as I said, 50-60% of the daily and annual volume of globally, global volume traded, you're too big to ignore, right? And because crypto in itself, and I don't think this is because of Binance is necessary, but because crypto is it really is a challenger for traditional finance. And so, I think it's understandable that a lot of the incumbents on incumbent financial systems see this as a massive threat. So when Binance announced that they wanted to go to Dubai and they wanted to start working on a very regulation friendly approach and help the UAE shape their regulations, we were very lucky that that's also when I think things started heating up in terms of our conversation. And essentially, what we told Binance was, Malaysia is one of the more narrow markets in terms of the regulatory approach, right? If you look at our neighbors, some of them go very broad based, right? So they say here's a few hundred cryptocurrencies, you can sell it to whoever and however you want, and then as you go along, we'll try to refine it. Whereas Malaysia started the other way around, which is that here's a handful of cryptocurrencies, or rather in the beginning two, and then as we go along, you have to justify what needs to come into the market. And the logic behind that for us is very simple, right? If I came from a regular, if we started in a regulated market, I could do 10 things, and then we went on to the next regulated market, and they could only do 3 out of those 10 things, then they would have a hard time accepting the fact that we are going to transition our operations that already include catering for 7 things that in their market was not really allowed. So we again, I see the glass as half full, right? In most things. So we said, well, if we start with Malaysia, yes, there's less that we can do, and I think a lot of your listeners are cognizant of that, right? Not as many um, products available in a market like Malaysia, but we look at it as a strength because there's a lot less friction points for us with other markets. And of course the converse is true for or the opposite is true for Binance, right? In the analogy I gave you, if it was 10 things that we thought of doing and we can only do three, Binance basically has the most in the world. They've got thousands of products, or the analogous thousands of products, and so we're working very closely with them to try to figure out which of their products make sense for a market and in market conditions like in Malaysia, and how do we work together to be able to kind of realize, as I would call it, that regulated version of that product, right? And I know a lot of your listeners are listening to this and thinking, well, I want that yield product, and I want to be able to do staking, and I want to be able to do DeFi, and I want to be able to do I want to be able to collateralize my NFT. So those are all the things that we're really looking deep into. How do you enable that within a market like Malaysia? And of course, when we released the news, I mean, time flies so fast. Like I believe it was last Tuesday, right? So it's like exactly a week ago. So yeah, I want to give a shout out to a lot of the Malaysian media and press, because I think they caught on to it. Obviously, as a bit of clickbait, having the name Binance in there is always easy for the media to pick up. But I think testament to a lot of the journalists that had approached us, and of course, Malaysia being as it is, some journalists had also already approached us before. I think, in fact, on this slide here, at least one of these sources is something that you could look up. They kind of leaked it a bit to the market before, and we were lucky enough that we could give clarification for that a couple of days later. And I think Malaysia is moving towards a higher, obviously, greater sense of awareness and product knowledge around crypto. But in speaking to the media, it is actually quite obvious that we're still at the very early stage of that journey, right? The majority of the Malaysian market, and I don't think the listeners tonight will be representative of this because of naturally who would kind of gravitate to a product like Sifu, but the majority of the market still thinks of cryptocurrencies as one giant scam, you know. And that's something that we're going to work quite hard towards, to kind of, clarify that, build out the market education, and definitely let people know, like, look, you can't just call everything cryptocurrency, right? Neither can you just call everything a digital asset, except in the academic sense of it being digital. A lot of these products, or that we call cryptocurrencies, a Bitcoin is very different than an Ether, right? And likewise, I think the use case and ecosystem of a BNB is very different than a Cardano, right? So they seem the same because they use blockchain to kind of avail a tokenization of their system, and so there's this concept of a currency or cryptocurrency in there, but then it's not as close as a Japanese yen to the US dollar, or a British pound to the ringgit, right? The way that they are used within their systems are very different, and I think this is something that a lot of the market needs to, kind of. It'd be great if they knew it, and we're also cognizant of the fact that in the land of abundant opportunities, Malaysia unfortunately has also been subjected to quite a few scams, right? I think there's some very very high profile and scams related to cryptocurrencies, and I think unfortunately a lot of people have lost significant amounts of money there, and that's obviously the number one reason that you should use a regulated DEX. We're not saying that we have the best features, and I think that the fanciest like things to do with your money, or your investment into crypto. But if this is new to you, then I think investor protection and safety, and knowing that if you've deposited 100 ringgit with us, that we will not be able to abuse that. And we've taken all of the preemptive measures to ensure that our own people, our own processes, will not be able to abuse that. It's key, primarily because of the overwhelming, and I think that I think I speak for a lot of people who have been in this space for a while, to that a lot of people have lost money to scams here. Cryptocurrency is just another variant of that, and they're very resourceful of how they do it. So don't don't be swayed by short term gains, and I and come to something like MX Global for longer term, peace of mind. And I think this is an argument which is easily made in crypto, because short-term gains in crypto can be significant gains, right? As you see with the market volatility. Maybe you want to go to the next slide. So, what's next? Again, first of all, I want to give a shout out to my guys, Alex and Liren, for putting this together. I mean, guys, the slides look amazing. It is entirely my fault that I haven't had the time to kind of like focus into this. But again, I think they've done an amazing job. I've touched a little bit about like in terms of what's next, but if I address this formally in terms of what we look at as like 6-month blocks, right? So from here, after we've announced it, what happens in the next 6 months, and then 6 months after that. So top of our mind right now, obviously, with a partner like Binance, is the technology itself, right? There's a huge difference between a technology that MX Global has developed, that's been tested by, we're very proud that we've had a few thousand, quite a few thousand users will start using us. But there is a technology stack that Binance has rolled out across the world that millions of people have used. And so, from a technology risk and robustness kind of standpoint, that tech stack is amazing. We will not be integrating it out of the box, as I kind of shared a little earlier. Our number one priority is to make sure that whatever product, including the platform itself, is compliant with the regulations. So I believe we will be investing significantly into the customization, or what we would term as the localization of some of the tech stack into the Malaysian context. So that's number one. Number two, of course, we recognize that Binance was a choice platform for many Malaysians. And so Malaysians have become quite discerning of the kind of, okay, let's forget about the derivative products or fancy things you can do with the cryptos, but they want they want some variety, right? If you look at the recent Finder study, of the 5 coins that are whitelisted in Malaysia, only 3 of them actually show up in the top 6 selected by Malaysians, or what are kept in Malaysians' wallets of crypto portfolios. So the other 3 we're definitely looking at, and I think our general attitude towards this is we want to support coins that want to work with Malaysians and be available to Malaysian investors. So one part of that is obviously the demand by the investors themselves, right? What they naturally gravitated and I think that's one of the advantages of having a partner like Binance. There is a lot of insight that we can gain from the many years that some Malaysians have been using Binance in terms of that natural progression of demand and what kind of coins to buy. The other side of this is obviously that we want to promote the likes of Polygon, the likes of Avalanche that local developers have been using. So we're very open to those kind of collaborations and trying to understand how can we best support them, because for a lot of those use cases you want to have the liquidity onshore. And so it makes a lot of sense for us to work very closely with those blockchains, and I guess if you can call them principals, and they're the guys who are developing applications locally using those blockchains. So that's I think the second part of our approach. The third being that we also want to look at coins which start from here, you know. So cryptocurrencies that call Malaysia home, are based in Malaysia. I'm a firm believer that if we can provide essential services which are now ubiquitous within the cryptocurrency space, you know, I'm sure many of you, have heard of CoinGecko and Etherscan, but not all of you realize that they're based in Malaysia, you know. So the likes of Matthew and Bobby have grown amazing teams in this space. So my argument is very simple. If we can provide core services which become synonymous with the cryptocurrency world, then why not a coin? And I'm not just saying that as a pipe dream. I think it's really something that some people will take very seriously as a challenge. This is not going to be kind of a garage style startup kind of approach. I think the way to grow a company, and I'm very adamant about this, even on my social media, the way to grow a company in Southeast Asia is not how you read about the Silicon Valley founders starting off in their mom's garage, right? For various reasons, that's a very difficult model to kind of take off over here. But at the same time, I think there has been lots of progress in the ecosystem here. So I diverge, I go off on a slight tangent. But if you see the CEO of Aerodyne, which is one of the largest drone services provider in the world, has just joined the board of Bandagara, and I don't think that's even something that anybody would have imagined to even be possible like 5 years ago, or maybe even a year ago, right? So I think things have progressed quite well, and then it's going to be, I, I believe, more supportive. The ecosystem can be more supportive. So that's why we think, as much as we're honored to be partnered with a beginning like Binance. We do feel that there is a sense. I mean, at the end of the day, Malaysia's home, right? So we do feel a strong sense of responsibility to not to say give back to the community, but ensure that we can support the growth of those who are serious enough to venture and be bold enough to grow a significant ecosystem. So that's firmly the way that we're looking at listing new coins. For those of you who are listening and you are working on a coin, as I kind of shared earlier, there will be an IEO license coming out of the SC, or should be announced within the next few months, I hope. So look out for them, right? And those are the guys that you want to talk to be able to guide you with a legal and compliant issuance, right? On in terms of fundraising with crypto, or rather fundraising for your cryptocurrency. Yeah, so kind of transitioning the tech and then looking at new coins definitely is the next 6 months. And when I say localizing the tech, I also mean the app, right? So um, I'm sure those of you who are listening to this on your phone would be would be much appreciative if we were if MX was available, not just on your phone browser, which it is today. So we're on desktop and also mobile responsive, but you also want it as an app, and we get that, right? We were actually, because you don't want to count your chickens before they're hatched. So we were developing a mobile platform before this deal was finalized. But now that we have Binance on board, yeah, I think, long story short, we kind of scrapped that plan and we're looking at localizing the same tech stack that Binance has agreed to kind of do it in the technology transfer. But again, the approach is not out of the box. We're going to localize that. There are various parts of the nitty gritty operational parts of a regulated exchange that I don't want to bore your audience with tonight, but it means that we just can't use something out of the box that's used offshore. So that's going to take us a couple of months, I think, and then in the meantime, we appreciate all the support and for all the investors to kind of sign up early, and drop us the note. Especially, I know many of you want to have more than these 5 cryptocurrencies available in Malaysia. It is not an overnight thing, right? And I think I had to make that very clear. It is not us writing to the SEC say, oh, Doreen told me that she would love to buy Avalanche. Can you please allow us to list it on Monday? I mean, even if the approvals were sought and given, right? The in essence the listing market making, ensuring that there's enough supply and demand meeting at different points. It is not an easy thing to kind of list a brand new coin. So, which is why, as I shared, sometimes we will try to work directly with the principal, and then sometimes they can do specific things that makes kind of like seeding that market a bit easier, especially for a market which, in a global scheme of things, is not so big as in Malaysia. Yeah.
All right. So thank you so much, Dato, for taking us through your slides. And so for those watching, if you have any questions, do drop your questions in the comment box, and we'll take your questions shortly. So in the meantime, so congratulations, Dato, on your company's recent capital investment. So maybe you can kindly talk us through the plans for the money.
Oh wow. Okay. So it is typically like when you raise a venture round, right? Or you structure it like a venture round. You plan for the money to last for 24 months. But having been on the other side of the table, I know from my VC hat that it never lasts 24 months. Um, to be honest, it is a significant amount, and I think it is fair to say that the majority of calls that I got were calls that would eventually cost would be an expense to the company if we were to take it up, right? So many people calling over the next couple of days after the announcement about do you want to sponsor this, do you want to do that, we can help get Lionel Messi sign a jersey, right, for a small fee so you can give it away to your users. So we're not closed off to a lot of these ideas, but yes, obviously I think it's natural that when you announce around, and obviously people associate, it's a public listed company and the biggest player in the cryptocurrency space. I think it's fair to say that it's not an insignificant round in terms of the partnership or even the size. So we number one, I think top of our list is to try to get the best talent, right? There's no way we can build this to any multitude if we don't have the best guys on board. So the majority of my time right now is being spent on, I wouldn't say reviewing candidates, but trying to connect with those who are in the market and potentially available, and looking at how that translates into how he or she could be, part of our growth story, right? So building the team is definitely number one. Number two, even with the technology transfer, there is some resource that we have to deploy to be able to, as I said, localize the technology. So, of course, we're going to be hiring developers, right? Both Web 2 and Web 3 developers. But at the same time, there are other parts of the cost stack that, not everything is kind of a hand-me-down or a loaner from Binance. So we have to also roll out some fairly serious services. So I think, in short, really kind of upgrading our infra is the most important. And actually, The third part is again related to kind of localizing products. Um, I think many of your listeners know that there are some crypto products which are not available in market like Malaysia. And so for us, we're going to be building some of them, right? Some that at least some of my friends who are using it in other markets think that it's very high utility. I don't want to give away what the products are, but there are also significant infrastructural investments that need to be made for those. So hopefully in the near future, you'll be able to do much more with your crypto with MX, and maybe one of our apparatus or companion devices that essentially you would be able to get the most out of your crypto, and it can be almost as seamless as your cash or credit card. Um, and that's what Jaya from Cuscapi was alluding to, like where we have this plan to kind of like redefine how commerce is done. We're also totally cognizant of the fact that yes, cryptocurrency is not legal tender, and we don't have any plans to make it legal tender or to make any of them legal tenders. Um, but there is a way that they could coexist um, symbiotically, right? And make our financial system more attractive at the same time, decrease that friction, so that when you're buying Bitcoin on the dip and later starts rising, you may want to not even think about selling some of them. You just want to spend it, and you want to have that be seamless. So I think those are the innovations or localization that we're very excited about. And obviously, it will take a bit of time because we are regulated by the SC, and some of those players that we're talking to are regulated by the Bank Negara. But I also believe that the regulations have moved quite significantly over the last few years. That as we start this series of engagements, they will start to progress even more. Right. On that note, I'll be in Dubai at the end of the month. Obviously for Binance Blockchain Week, or rather, what is Dubai Blockchain Week, but Binance is the title sponsor this year, and also for the World Government Summit. And that latter conference is amazing, right? You Historically at the WGS, governments have kind of shared about really how they're pushing innovation, not at odds with administration and governance, but really kind of to supplement uh, their national transformation. So I'm hoping to get quite a few ideas, and most importantly, like kind of meet people who have done it in other markets. Maybe not identical, maybe not exactly the same product, but working on a product that kind of touches very sensitive parts of the economy, and of course our financial ecosystem is very important. As we've seen, right, in COVID, many Malaysians don't have more than a month's worth of savings. So um, I don't believe that we should be beta testing in the open market. But at the same time, the benefit of being a regulated player is that a lot of these products have already been tested or beta tested in the unregulated market, right? So we don't have to use our own resources and time and risk our own economy to be able to test them. People have used them in other places, and yes, to some degree, great things have been, it's enabled great things to happen. But in some cases, it's also had dire consequences. So how do we learn from that and ensure that we don't open up the same risk in Malaysia? So really, Dorian, I think like it's those three, right? I'm gonna hire great people, build great tech, and work closely to be able to kind of realize some products that you haven't seen yet in the regulated space in Malaysia.
Yeah, that should keep the market very excited to see what's in store, right? Okay, maybe we can take a question from the floor, like Aiden. He asks about the liquidity of MX Global. So he's saying that liquidity is very thin. So will Binance be able to provide some market makers to our market?
Yeah. So thanks a lot, Eden. Um, like I said, we started in July. We really formally opened in terms of, of like having public users in August, and I'm happy that liquidity has kind of gone kind of tenfold. It's about 10-15 fold of what we saw in kind of 2 months in. So we are working with a few market makers, and obviously, no surprise that Binance is one of those parties or interested parties in there. So we are looking and formalizing with the regulator, the availability or the ability for private companies or liquidity partners or market makers to be able to participate in MX. It is a bit difficult, right? We don't there is no crypto trading pairs in Malaysia yet. So I think if you're somebody based in Hong Kong or Singapore, the fact that the pairs are always tied to ringgit is a bit of a hindrance, right? It's a very different risk profile for those who are market making. So it's something that we are working together with different partners on, um, and we're trying to figure out the right mix that I think will best serve our users or investors. So we're moving towards that. Yeah. So short answer to that to Aiden is yes, definitely it's going to be improving. Um, we also have one of these products that we're developing that will also assist directly in terms of market liquidity without MX actually being a participant in the order book or market itself. So we'll be looking at that and be rolling those out. So I would expect that liquidity on MX should improve tremendously.
All right, thank you, Dato. So, like thinking about the future, do you have any roadmap for the relevant strategies that you mentioned just now?
Uh, yes, but I think it may not be something that we're entirely comfortable to share, kind of in a public forum like this. Um, but I guess at a high level, for me to share, we believe that you know yourself, Doreen, as a consumer or a consumer investor of cryptocurrencies, you really deserve three things. Number one, for it to be safe. Number two, for it to be easy, and number three, for it to be as real as it can be. And what I mean by that is, number one, you should have no doubt that uh, for every dollar or every Bitcoin or every Ether that you have in place in MX, it really is yours. I know there's a long-standing debate of over who holds the private keys to your virtual, the virtual account, because essentially that's how we host you. You have, a sub account in MX, um, but the regulations being such, I just wanted to show you that for every ringgit that you put in, you never deposit that into the MX operational account. We don't even get to pay the electrical bill from that money. That goes into a trust account. So your ringgit fiat is entirely out of our operational reach, right? We're entirely responsible for that safety. And obviously, we don't do that directly. We use a service, a trustee, and so they're very well respected in the industry, and they have a long, very good history, a track record. So we know that that's safe. At the same time, we use an equivalent trust or custody provider for your cryptocurrency. So when you put a Bitcoin into your account, Doreen, on MX, I don't get to touch it at all, right? It remains yours. The right to it's entirely yours, and that's also hosted in through a solution that we bring in. So you know, a lot of people give regulations a hard time, but to the consumer investor, it is as safe as it should be or could be, given the market conditions and the players. The second part is also important, right? That it has to be easy, and we're totally cognizant of the fact that the first version of MX that we built was more towards a professional investor. We had a specific strategy back then, because obviously we couldn't blindly bank on this kind of partnership, kind of playing itself out. So we understand that it has to be a lot more seamless, and and so we're building the next iteration of MX and the mobile app so that it's actually very intuitive and easy to use. The third, I think, will come from those. I'm trying really hard not to give it away, but essentially, we're going to be building regulated products that you've never used before or you've never seen before. But to some of you who have been in this space for long enough, you may have used some version of this in some unregulated markets, right? So making it really, really accessible on all of those three fronts, to make it safe, to make it easy, and to make it as real as it can get, uh, is what we think will drive our direction. Yes, in terms of our decisions or roadmaps, that too, right? I think anybody who's kind of like read about Elon Musk's like journey through SpaceX, every decision he makes is whether it brings the launch date closer by a minute, an hour, a day, right? And that's how you assess what's a good and bad decision to make for the business. For us, it is not entirely similar, but there are some parts of that which we resonate with, right? Like how fast can we get the Malaysian market to be able to experience the high demand products that we already know Malaysians are using out there. You know, I'm not going to ask anyone to put up their hands and admit that they may be using not one of the four RMO dexes, but it is common knowledge that Malaysians are quite resourceful, and then they will go out and get what they want. So how do we build the things that they want most onshore into Malaysia? I guess would be the equivalent of my launch date litmus test for every decision.
All right, thank you, Dato. So, my next question, like back in 2019, there were some major clampdowns on the crypto ecosystem in Malaysia and elsewhere as well. So, it's interesting that these clampdowns haven't actually deterred your commitment. So, we would like to know what drives this commitment.
Okay, I think that I cannot take all the credit for. Right, full disclosure, I joined MX in August, in August 2021. Prior to that, I was advising the company as they were going through the licensing process with the SC, and of course, they had started that process well before I met with them, which was in Q2 2021. So I will not take the credit for that. I walked into an office that had 24 staff, all totally committed to seeing this through. You know, it's one of the reasons that I actually agreed to even step in and I guess helm the company, because these people really believed that they deserve to be able to do this business, and they were serious enough and were not making any concessions for that. The company was at all times, when they were going through the licensing process, ready to start the business the next day. Of course, as time progresses and crypto moves at breakneck speed, so sometimes you 3 months expectation of the products change. So that aside, the team itself was very committed, and we still have the same team. And as days go by, we add on new high value members, and of course, now that we can actually run the business, there are various gaps exposed in terms of things which were not obvious when you had zero users, then when you had a few hundred users and a few thousand users. So as we scale out, we know that there are gaps to be filled, and yeah, testament to that, the teams really come together. I do know that we lost a key member of the management team, because she had an amazing opportunity, kind of within her domain of expertise, and maybe your Sifu audience will also hear from her or the company that she joined shortly, in the next few weeks or months, I think. But those are the only kind of attritions that happen in MX, right? When people, not to say lose focus or lose hope in the promise of what we can do with crypto, but it's when kind of the offer that on the table is so, like no one's gonna say that you're a bad person for taking that one, right? It's just an amazing opportunity, and we're 110% behind her. And I look forward to tuning into her seafood session, and you guys should totally have them on too. But yeah, what drives that commitment? Really, Jason, who's the founding investor of the company, um, really saw that the future is going to be reinvented by blockchain, right? And cryptocurrencies will exist in a very different way than we even see them today. and and part of that I think I resonate a lot with, because I was just a young child when the internet came about, right, in the late 90s. I mean, I was literally like, yeah, maybe like not even hitting 10, right? That's when the internet was born. So I never will have the chance. I will never have the chance to kind of live through that global transformation, if you will. And to me, that's what blockchain and cryptocurrencies are. It's another another like huge inflection point for the global economy. Um, and yes, it is different. It's not connecting computers and connecting data. It is in a way running parallel, and maybe one day even uh, superseding the financial infrastructure or ecosystem globally. And that's exciting, right? And I think having to wait a couple of months more to get a license to do this is well worth it. So yeah, we're at the beginning stages of our journey, and I think testament to all of the team who have kind of stuck by the company and joined at various points. But yeah, we've got a long way to go, uh, and I think we just have the best partners to work with on this ride.
Yeah, kudos to you, Dato, and your team for the commitment, and there'll be a long road ahead. So, Dato, you mentioned about the regulation earlier. So, what is your take on over regulation of cryptocurrencies? Like how is your company facing the challenges?
That's a great question. I think it depends on the day. I'm totally undecided whether Malaysian regulations are just enough, or in some instances over-regulated. It is, as I said, one of the narrower markets, right? Um, that's not a subjective point of view. It's quite objective. If you look at, as I said, under the CMSA, there is also the guidelines on digital assets. There are only 5 whitelisted cryptocurrencies in Malaysia: Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash, and Ripple. You go an hour south to Indonesia, 227. And of course, not every exchange supports 227 coins, but it gives like a very different starting point of how the industry will grow and can start. Um, so it is neither good nor bad, neither better nor worse. It's just different. We start from a different point, and we choose to see the opportunity in that. Um, what I would say is, whether you perceive it as over or under regulated, or sorry, over or just well enough regulated, the regulator itself is open, right? And I think, and that's key. If the SE was always closed off to any idea, uh, then I think no amount of pushing or no amount of innovating is going to change that. But the SE isn't, right. They heard out our case, and they understood. For those of you who have been following, obviously this wouldn't have been an easy consideration by the regulator, because Binance in itself was reprimanded by the SE in July. So we do believe that we addressed uh, you know the majority, if not all, of those considerations, and that our partner was in many ways compliant with the request of the SC that had come before. But I think the big part of this is that it wasn't kind of like a 5-minute decision. They really thought long and hard, which is testament to them for not only taking their jobs seriously, but giving it a very objective view, and weighing out the what could be and what could not be, and also at the same time, giving us in our space to be able to work out the kinks. A deal like this definitely is not so straightforward. If you were on the other side of the table before you became our partner, of course you would ask for the stars and the moon and everything, right? Like, naturally, that's how you would start to negotiate. But you know, things being as they were, the regulators were quite open to at least suggestions, and of course brought up certain points that were to address certain risk points, and we respect that, which is why right now I think it's up to us to kind of show that there's a lot more benefit than downside to kind of this partnership moving forward for the Malaysian market.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Doctor. You mentioned earlier about you gave us a brief on MX Global. Maybe you can just give us what is the main aim of MX Global.
Oh, um, one day you're gonna buy Bitcoin, and with the safety and assurance that sometimes MX Global can give you, you would be able to do things with that today that you can't imagine that you would be able to do it at all, right? I firmly believe in that because year and a half ago, there's no DeFi, there's no staking was kind of a very alien concept. Even till today, it's not that easy to do, right? So our general aim is what can you do with a cryptocurrency or digital asset, and we want to make sure that you can do that within the safety of a regulated environment, right? It may sound oxymoronic. It may sound to some people like, well, you can't be that innovative as long as it's regulated. Yes, to a degree that may be true, but we also had Maybank EasyPay before you had BNPL. So I think in many ways, I always think that we have to be like a Maybank and bring something like an EasyPay to market years ahead of people thinking of buy now pay later as an industry. Today, BNPL operators are mushrooming left, right, and center, right? But in its heyday, it was only the likes of a Maybank that would bite the bullet and essentially what is a similar product, right? So 6 months repayment versus 3 months repayment at 0% interest is an innovation that we had for a while, but maybe it didn't skyrocket or gain virality or become novel as it has with BNPL today. I mean, a lot of you, I'm pretty sure you've heard of Atomi and Split and all that, but I think it was like 8 years ago, there's Maybank EasyPay. So that's where we want to be. We want to be the guys who bring the next product or the next tool that you can use your cryptocurrency for. And we want to bring it to this market. And we believe that if we repeat that model in other regulated markets, we would be not only the exchange of choice, but I think we'd be the partner of choice for many regulators, you know, because their job's to protect you. So our job should be to tell them how we would enable you to do what you want to do in a safe way.
Well said, Dato. So maybe we can talk about Binance. Like Binance is like the gold standard when it comes to global crypto exchange, and this is definitely a coup for MS Global. So further to the strategic investments from Binance, how will this shape MX Global going forward?
Okay, so as you already put it, they're number one in the world. You add number two, three, four, and five. You double that number. Sorry, you sum that number, and after you double it, you don't reach anything like the daily volume of a Binance. And some people would look at it and say, well, the market depth or liquidity is the key part of this partnership. We're not going to ignore it, but we don't think that's the key part, right? The technology transfer and knowledge transfer is, we believe, the most important thing, because as I think history has kind of shown, the Malaysian investor, Malaysian consumer is very discerning, right? The reality is like this is not a market that used Facebook when it's version 0.1 or even Facebook 1.0, right? This is a market that used Facebook when it was very much well tested and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people had already used it. So your first experience of Facebook, the earliest version of Facebook experience for you, was something that other people had before you complain about bugs and such. So I think on both fronts, Malaysians being very discerning, and also because we do believe that the cryptocurrency or financial space is not somewhere that you want to be beta testing. That tried and tested technology stack and the technological approach to how they've laid out some of their products, I think that's key. And that's what's going to differentiate our approach to the market versus other competitors, I believe. So that's number one, right? The technology and knowledge transfer. Number two is access to this global network. Binance in and of itself, of course, operates Binance.com. but they also have localized platforms in some other markets, and they have also have investments in some other markets and sectors, right? So Indonesia is another regulated market that they've had a significant play in for a while. So understanding, beyond cryptocurrency itself, the dynamics of growing a team in an industry which is so new, you know um, before this I was building web apps and mobile apps, and I can tell you that even in those spaces it was already hard to get talent. But that's an industry that's existed for 15, 16 years and it's still hard to get talent. What about in an industry that's all of 5 years old in Malaysia, right? Super hard to get. So I think that network and being able to, kind of be shoulder to shoulder with some other partners, or indirect partners, right, through the relationship of Binance, and understanding how they manage to get over some of these hurdles and grow a team in a very new but in many ways challenging markets. Um, that's I think invaluable to us. So we'll be, yeah, if my team's listening, so we'll be probably be like visiting some other countries very soon to kind of trade notes with them. So that's I think like super key in a partnership, and some of the Binance investments have not been just exchanges. They have the likes of coin market cap, and of course Forbes, right? So there are lots of different dynamics to the group that we can tap on based through our investor, that we can learn from, um, and some I believe would be more applicable to the Malaysian market than others, because as I said, this is not an early adopter market. No matter how much we've sold this, anybody can be a startup kind of story, and I'm equally as responsible as many guys who promoted that. But now in hindsight, and of course I blame it on age, right? Only only through the wisdom of age do I see that yes, actually you really can't grow it like how it's might be grown in Silicon Valley, or definitely you can't grow it like how CZ grew Binance. So taking all of those things on board, and as the saying goes, like hearing it from the horse's mouth, I think are very, 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 very powerful messages and things that we can learn from. And so that's what we look forward to doing, I think, most of all in that partnership.
Right, Dato', you mentioned about technology transfer. So this is really key. But how will this benefit MX Global in terms of wider market adoption and higher trading turnover?
So higher trading turnover, I believe, is close to what the question came up just now, right? It's about liquidity, and getting that order book volume to go up. So yes, similar to what I answered before, we're talking to various partners in terms of market makers, and of course, Binance is not a non entity in those discussions, right? We're talking to their quant team and how we can do that. Some of the technologies that we're talking about in Binance are things that even if you're a Binance user today, it will not work for you now. Like you just can't use it. But as an Amex customer, we believe that there's a version of that Amex will promote and Amex will operate that you would find high value in, right? And of course, Binance is not selling their data to us. Like by no means, please do not read this as us like buying information on you as if you were a Binance user. No, it's not about that, right? It's that data in aggregate, right? Clearly, a Malaysian has a different affinity of certain coins and certain products, and certain tabs that they've clicked, or may not have clicked in on the app as such. So I think that leads a lot of our conversations in technology transfer. It's what Malaysians want, and we're not judging it based on what we think would be cool. We want to base our at least our initial decisions on what we know Malaysians have demonstrated on a platform like Binance.
All right. So as a follow-up, which would be the feature of Business Rail that you think MX Global can implement the fastest on Binance blockchain? Will there be a cross-order book which improves trading liquidity?
I'm gonna guess like a lot of questions you get from the audience is all leading to the same thing, which is, can we tap into the Binance order book, right? Short answer is unfortunately no. Yeah, I think, and that I think we have to be fair to the audience here. For as long as crypto is linked to the ringgit fiat and there's no crypto to crypto pairs, it's very difficult for us to link in directly into the Binance order book. However, being a direct partner and investee of Binance itself, there are certain concessions that we can make with regards to their treasury and their crypto reserves. And I don't want to give too much away. We'll be announcing a few things into the market soon, and you'll see that you'll get, you know, some products in terms of access and protection that you will not be able to get anywhere else. And yes, it's because our partner is the biggest in the world, but I think it speaks volumes about their approach to the regulated market, which is that they have built products that they didn't have to in the unregulated space. They didn't have to build it to comply with any government, but they did it to kind of win over and assure their customers, right, of the best experience and the safest experience in a different light, in a non-regulatory light. So those are the I think that the features that we're most excited about integrating. But with regards to kind of dialing in directly into the order book, connecting directly into there, ringgit fiat is still not available on Binance, and MX Global has no intention of operating Binance.com.my, right? So we're not operating the Malaysian version of Binance for various reasons. I would argue that our business directions are totally separate, but at the same time, in a way, complementary, right? Binance has taken a very different route to get here. We've obviously just started the journey, but we don't see that the near term of the journey exactly mirrors what MX does in Malaysia versus what Binance does. Being a global player as they are. So, but we do believe that down the line, those two paths will kind of converge, and then there's a lot of value transfer or value sharing between us and Binance down the line. But yeah, if I read this question properly too, I think that the first part on like what can we implement fastest on the Binance blockchain, maybe the person asking was referring directly to BSC, Binance Smart Chain, which is their blockchain, right? So there's Binance Chain and there's Binance Smart Chain. Yeah, this goes back to something I shared earlier, which is we don't have to experiment too much in the regulated space because a lot of the experimentation is already done in the unregulated space. So we believe that the right place for experimenting with BSC would probably be in the BSC ecosystem and not necessarily in an MX Global. But we are cognizant of the fact that there is latent and demand, and in fact, like in some cases, strong localized demand for BNB. So yeah, I just want to shout out here, like if you're a developer working on something in the BSC ecosystem and you're using BNB, as I believe at least one local NFT marketplace is doing, do reach out to us, because we want to understand why it's important for you to use BSC or transact in BNB, and then from there understand whether it makes sense for us to support a coin like that into the Malaysian ecosystem, right? We want to be supportive of everyone. We don't want to. We're not going to dictate how you should grow your business. That's not what we're about. But we want to understand why you've chosen certain tools and paths for your business, and that helps us, kind of shape an argument for what should be next on the menu in terms of opening up to the Malaysian market.
Right, Dato, you mentioned about introducing some of the very innovative digital assets or coins in the future. Maybe just as an inkling, how many digital assets or crypto assets will be available initially, and what will be the targeted number of assets to be made available?
I'm glad you asked it that way and not like what are the assets that are going to be available. I don't think I could answer down to that level, but yeah, so it's more than five. Um, um, I really shouldn't give it away. Our team's working very hard at this, but what I can share is that definitely more than five, and five is what's permissible right now in the whitelist.
Okay, that's a good number. Okay. Um, so will MX offer other services such as staking, fund management, leverage, trading in the mode of Finance Global?
Yes and no. We're very cognizant of what we should be doing and should be concentrating under the RMO DEX license. So we do see ourselves primarily as an exchange, right? Uh, it's not a one size fits all approach. I think that there will be products where we would have to step up and kind of fill in a certain function because that function for one reason or another doesn't exist in the way that it has to exist or can exist in the Malaysian scene. So we're cognizant of that. But say for those kind of situations, we just want to be able to partner and enable other players, right? So if you take the example of NFTs, for example, um, oh sorry, the industry of NFTs, for example, local NFTs, we have no immediate ambition to host our own NFT marketplace, right? We believe that guys like at Pentas or NFT Pangolin are doing a great job. You know, I mean, those are entirely different businesses. I mean, we raised a significant amount of capital. We didn't raise that much, right? It's not like we can just go and start a business every other day with the capital we raise. So we're cognizant of the fact of like where we want to be good at, and I think this Doreen goes back to my argument just now, which is that talent's not easy to get. So the last thing I want to do is work very hard and hire 100 smart people, but have to work on like 40, 50 different projects and lose them because we cannot have that focus, right? I've been in companies where focus is a problem, and then you lose good people because of that, because there isn't this shared kind of like, flag in the ground that we're all marching towards, right? Everyone's kind of marching towards slightly different directions. So no, we want to be very focused in terms of the fact that we provide that platform. And if Pentas or NFT Pangolin were already supporting creators to issue NFTs, then we want to make it as simple as, if you're an MX customer, you can find that on some sort of tab. The content doesn't come from us, and then we figure out how we add value to your Pentas or NFT Pangolin experience. And that may be very simply as, you click that if it transacts in BNB or Ethereum or Polygon or whichever coin they use, right? It's seamless. You click that, you buy it, and it just happens, right? So I think that's the kind of magic that we want to see, because I liken the state of cryptocurrency today as like, this is IRC. We are nowhere near Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp with regards to a messaging kind of equivalent. ICQ has not been born yet. It's not that easy to use chat. So that's where I believe we are today with crypto. It is just not that easy yet. So if we're in IRC, the least that we can do and the minimal that we aim for is to give birth to an ICQ. And I'm just throwing this out because I think some of your listeners might be super young and they have no idea what IRC and ICQ is. But I think there's some of these guys who have been through it. They know the difference, right? That's not WhatsApp. That's not Telegram. That's not Facebook Messenger. That was ICQ. Oh, right? If you remember that.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, then given the above, what are your own internal projections for MX in terms of your user growth and also trading volume frequency?
Oh, I in the early days, it's pretty is it would be a bit irresponsible for me to announce this, right? But safe to say that our target user base at the end of the year is well into the six figures, and our volume, our targeted volume by the end of the year is again, it depends how you count it, how you measure it, right? Because you measure it in terms of like absolute amounts or such, but we understand what volume of Binance Malaysian trade volume accounted for, right? And we believe that 25 to 35% of that is feasible, primarily because it's not like we can't just have the same volume, but we have to be cognizant of the fact that it's not the same product lines, right? And I said this before, like if Binance can do 100 things, we know we're not going to be able to do 100 things, at least not in the first year. So we don't think the volume will translate directly, but we have made certain strategic or tactical choices of what kind of products we want to roll out, because we're confident that that translates to a significant portion of the volume that they had seen from a Malaysian-based user base, right? A Malaysian linked user base. So that's how we kind of guide our targets, and it's not going to be easy. And we appreciate all of the help that we can get, or all the support we can get from our consumer investors. And I think if there are great people listening on the call and you're really interested in this space, and you feel that you have indispensable skills to kind of lend to us, and you're looking for a job, right? Um, Drop us a note, and we have vacancy lists on mxglobal.com.my, but at the same time, we can't account for everything. So if you feel that you're somebody we should have, then write us an email, and I promise I will reply.
All right. Okay. Dato, you don't mind, we can take one last question. This is from the
Sure.
floor from Adam Harris. He asks, what are the possible steps MX can take to get support from the regulators on the new token offerings such as Avalanche and Cardano?
What are the possible steps MX can take to get support from regulators? Okay, so um, I okay. Well, thanks a lot to Adam Harris. I mean, he sounds like a fairly bright young guy. I think if he's interested in a role in crypto, this is a great question. So we'd love to hear from you too. Uh, okay, number one, the guidelines already state what is the assessment points and criteria of a, as I said, the SC regulates us as a service provider, like Aramo a digital asset exchange, but they also regulate what I call the whitelist, right? Where the 5 coins exist and the 5 coins which are allowed. So the criteria to meet the assessment is in the guidelines. So that's not even a surprise. Like it is not a lottery in that sense. Um, so I don't think the right approach is to get support from the regulators to want to list Avalanche and Cardano. I believe that the right approach would be that the projects using Avalanche or AVX or Cardano or ADA, right? Reach out to us and let us know how you want to use it, why that's important for Malaysia, or why for you as a business it's important for you to have liquidity through a Malaysian exchange. It will really help us understand that. And especially if you're working quite closely with Avalanche and Cardano themselves, right, the blockchain itself, we'd love to also chat with them, because for us to understand what their roadmap is and then what's your application roadmap, and linking that in, and then being able to go with a cohesive story to the SC and saying, yes, maybe the use case is not the biggest, but this is why it's important for the country, right? Or maybe, wow, the use case is going to be huge, right? And even whether it's huge or not, the risks are mitigated because we've had several rounds of discussions with these players, and we understand how they want to use it and how they want to drive adoption. Ethereum, Ethereum and Bitcoin are the easiest ones, because if you just look at the dominance, right? Combined, they make up for 2/3 of the daily volume. Ethereum and Bitcoin first, right? Bitcoin number one, Ethereum number two. They're like what every other person buys. So even if you're in the SC, it's a no-brainer to allow the first two. But beyond that, if you've been monitoring kind of the dominance charts, it's not always a consistent position 3, 4, and 5, right? So what's going to be quite important for the Malaysian market is to understand where's that latent and local demand, and how do you quantify it. I think on that note, if you are working, so if Adam Harris is working on something on Avalanche and Cardano, do reach out to us, and please do not be put off when I say that we have to kind of work together to kind of present a story at SC, or to the SC, because that's typically where I lose a lot of potential partners. That everybody gets very, very nervous, but I don't want the regulators to know that I'm doing this. No, you should take the opposite attitude, which is that if you know what you're doing is not wrong, right? At the end of the day, you're using a piece of technology, wherever it's Cardano, Avalanche, or whatever it is, right? And you're just using it to make an application that, again, doesn't directly jeopardize or contradict our local laws. And I would even argue that even if it did, right, even if it was testing it, it's just much better to speak to the regulator first. At least you're on their radar, and then they don't overreact when they hear about you using it later, you know. So I really do advise a lot of our potential partners. It's a bit more work, but you want to be on the right side of the law and the regulator. You want to make this thing a success. I think we've seen, at least a few projects which didn't engage, and they got shut down very quickly. And I know that personally, I know that some of them were in it for, I would say, the right reason, and maybe they would argue that the SC overreacted. But the truth is, you also have to be fair to the regulator. If they knew nothing about your intentions and your roadmap, like the same kind of questions that you asked me during right tonight. If you don't address these, then you can't always assume that other people will assume the best, right? And so you must be open to the risk of things going south and them misunderstanding, because the truth is a lot of good projects can still be abused, right? So in the absence of any information, I don't think you can blame the regulator for assuming that the risks are not accounted for and not mitigated. So I love going to the SC. So if you want to work closely on that, we can work together to help them understand what it is that you're trying to achieve, and then making some of your offerings or some of the protocols or blockchain projects that you're working on or working with available to the Malaysian public.
All right, thank you, Dato. It looks like we have covered a lot of ground, so there are many more questions for Dato to answer, but that's all the time we have for today. Is there anything else you'd like to cover before we wrap up, Dato?
Yeah, I just want to give a quick shout out to, of course, the team at Sifu, right, for having us today. More than anything else, I want to give a shout out to, before this call, I kind of looked at the post that you put on Facebook. I saw a few people who liked it and everything. I recognized a few names, you know, um, and I want to thank some of those people for being early adopters of IMAX Global, and definitely a few names that I recognize even more, that you've been very active in trading on MX Global. We want to do right by you. Like I said, we want to create new tools. Um, you know, I don't mind just calling it out. I mean, we know that Luno is the number one dominant market share in terms of retail investor exposure, right? Um, but we don't think we didn't get this license to try to kill Luno. There's only four of us. There's MX, Luno, Synergy, Tokenize. There's a lot more to gain in terms of building the ecosystem together at various points, right, of collaboration. And so this was definitely not a license that we went after to be able to kill somebody off, or compete directly with somebody. It's something that we thought would be able to add value, and be able to work together. So to that, I think I want to thank a lot of our users, our early users, who continue to support MX. And of course, I cannot guarantee that your investments will go up or down. That is a market risk, but we will always stand by you to make sure that your experience is safe, protected, and definitely we will not be allowing your cryptocurrencies or your fiat deposits with us to be abused in any way. So I really want to thank you for all of the faith, and yeah, it's going to be a one hell of a ride. So stay tuned. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Dato. So, thank you, everyone. We appreciate you being here and for staying throughout the show, and also for your questions. And do remember to download Sifu app. Is the only investing app that you ever need. And also, maybe do check out the website, and we have many more interesting videos and articles for you to read. So, once again, thank you, and we'll see you next time. Good night.
Thank you, Doreen.
Thank you.